What's going on? It's If You Have to Pick Three. I'm Matt.
And I'm Zakk.
If you haven't joined us for one of these before, you're in for a treat this time. Fresh off of the heels of us talking about Eddie Van Halen and his signature Frankenstrat that was up on the stage at the Grammys. Our other episode, Am I Missing Something, on the Grammys tribute to Eddie Van Halen. We got to thinking, well, his Frankenstrat. Yeah, that's Eddie Van Halen in a nutshell, his Frankenstrat. What other kind of iconic instruments are out there? So Zakk and I, we came up with our list for if you have to pick three iconic instruments. I think this is going to be a very interesting discussion here. Myself, personally, I'm a guitar player. I love me some guitars. So I'm curious to see how much kind of overlaps with you.
Why don't you just tell everyone what your preferred model is? Let's get really specific over here.
Well, my preferred model, I always liked PRSs. I played a custom 24 when I was in a band, and I always wanted an orange one, but I couldn't find an orange one at the time. But
why orange?
I don't know. I just really like orange for some reason. I ended up finding this yellow one with it's almost like a cherry on the back, or like a dark magenta or maroon, but it was a really cool looking guitar. So I had that. I do have a Les Paul tucked away somewhere. It was the direct tribute to Les Paul when he passed away. That's cool. So that's really cool. That's a dark cherry color. I have like this one little guitar that's kicking around here. It's really cool. It was custom painted to look like the Union Jack flag. It's not like any particular brand. It's just, kind of like a knockoff guitar that I have. And I got a few others.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a guitar guy myself. I mean, I don't have a huge collection as you're showing off. But I personally love Schecter guitars. I still have an S1 Blackjack. It's a really cool shape. It looks like the Angus Young SG Gibson, but it's got a little bit more of a body to it. And I always love Schecters because you can really get a lot of cool sound. So I've always said if I do end up getting another guitar, it probably would still just be a Schecter too, because I've always just been a fan of them. And I've always been kind of tempted because I'm rusty. I don't really play anymore. I'm like, man, I should sell the guitar and get some few bucks, and I just can't. I hold it in my hands and I can't let go of it. It's still just, there's something special about it. And that's just the beauty of guitars, that if it brings you joy, even just holding it, then you're a lucky man.
Yeah.
Speaking of lucky, I want to give a special shout out to our sponsor, Lucky 13 Beard Co. See what I did there?
Yeah, they make small batch beard oils and balms right here in Jersey. And really great guy. Ed owns the company, and him and I were talking about beard oils the other night. But I'm not going to go into the whole spiel, but he's a really cool guy. Always comes out with new scents. He does a tobacco vanilla, came out with a cherry tobacco vanilla. He's actually put together a few other brand new scents since we've originally featured them on the show. He actually just did one that was inspired by his honeymoon, so it's kind of like a tropical smelling one. So it's really cool. If you've never tried one, make your face feel really good, make your beard feel really soft, and that special other someone in your life may think you got a little bit of a strong stubble going on. You might want to condition it up a little bit, and you owe it to yourself to do that too. And what a perfect time to do it now. Then we got this promo code from Ed. He said, you know what, give him 10% off. Try it out.
Oh, nice.
Okay.
What a nice guy.
Go to etsy.com/shop/lucky13, the number, Beard Co., and put in the code EFP10 when you check out, and you'll get 10% off your entire order.
Again, that's EFP10. Put it into the website, and you'll get 10% off. I wish you can get that kind of deal when buying a guitar, because they are expensive.
Yeah, just a little.
Just a little. So, Matt, I'm going to let you go first. Tell us which three, in no particular order, you would call the most iconic signature instruments.
All right. So I did this a little bit differently because, like I said, I'm a guitar guy. But when you think about iconic instruments, they're not all guitars. And that's why we called it the iconic instruments. So I picked one drum set, one bass guitar.
Drums.
Yep. One drum, one bass, and one guitar. I'm going to start out with the very first one here. We're going to start out with the drum kit. People are going to disagree with me. There's something to be said about a really, really simple drum kit. But, when you think of drum kits, some people think of like the Dream Theater style drum kits that like Eric Mangini plays, and the drums are wrapped completely around him, almost to the point where he's 360 degrees in drums, and there's drums all over the top of his, the top of his rack. But then there's like other crazy sets, like, what Slipknot and Tommy Lee use. Obviously Tommy Lee's in Motley Crue. For those internet people out there that are going to correct me, yes, I know Tommy Lee plays drums for Motley Crue. But, Tommy Lee's got his crazy things that he does with his drums, and Slipknot, they got the drum set that kind of tilts forward as, I forget what his name is when he's playing.
Joey Jordison. The original guitarist, Joey Jordison.
The original drummer was
drummer. Original drummer.
Yeah, Joey Jordison, when he was there, did that. I forget who it is now. I forget his name.
Jay Reinberg.
Yes, that's it. But yeah, when he plays, the drum set kind of tilts forward. I think it spins, if I'm not mistaken. But like I said, there's something to be said about a really simple drum kit, and I'm going all the way back to the most simplest of kits, which kind of ignited the world on fire. We're talking about Ringo Starr's drum kit. This is probably going to be the simplest drum kit that you could get. There's one snare, one tom, a floor tom, and a kick tom. And on the front, it just says the Beatles. And then actually, if you look at the 63 concert, it's the Beatles live. It looks like Ringo Starr is like sitting like 4 feet above his drum kit. Like he's hunched over the snare drum. But for all of the sounds and how many people saw this drum kit over the years, I mean, I don't think that there's another drum kit out there that kind of has, I want to say, as much of an impact. Granted, you can, like we talked about, Dream Theater's got their crazy sets, and Slipknot and Tommy Lee and Rush with Neil Peart when he was still alive. But just for the sheer amount of hits and the sheer amount of, I guess, sounds that they were able to accomplish with such a simple drum kit, I think that speaks volumes. So for me, number one is going to be Ringo Starr's drum kit. Number two, we're going to go to a bass guitar, and we're not going to travel very, very far. I thought about this one long and hard because it was definitely between Lemmy and Paul McCartney. The thing that did it for me with Paul McCartney's bass, once again, it is the sheer amount of hits, the sheer amount of people who saw this bass guitar and didn't necessarily know it was a bass guitar. It looked like a violin. It's his Hoffner Bass. I mean, first off, it's left-handed, so it's completely weird right off the bat because there's not too many left-handed bass players or too many left-handed guitarists in the world. And not only is he playing left-handed, he's playing something that looks like a violin. But then, once again, it's the Beatles. Probably the first time that people saw the Hoffner Bass was on the concert that I mentioned earlier, or even when the Beatles came out on Ed Sullivan. People saw this for the first time and followed the Beatles up until the end of their career. And crazy how many recordings this bass has been on and how many different things he can do with this bass. I mean, granted, there's a lot of, trickery that can happen nowadays with electronics, but yeah, Paul McCartney and his Hoffner Bass. We're going to go with that at number two.
So you got two Beatles.
Yep. And now we're going completely away from the Beatles for number three. This is the hardest one that I've had to do. So this is the guitar, obviously, and I had to go with what I thought the most iconic guitar of all time was. Some people would argue it's a Strat. For me, it's a Gibson. It's obviously a Les Paul. It is one of the first electric guitars, if not the first electric guitar. But when you start to talk about iconic Les Pauls, there are so many that you can talk about. You could talk about Jimmy Page. You can talk about Eric Clapton. He had one. You could talk about Zakk Wylde if you want to come newer. Ace Frehley. I mean, Joe Perry. There's just so many people that over the years have played iconic Les Paul guitars. But there's one that rises above it all for me. And that's Slash's Appetite for Destruction Les Paul. This guitar has so much mystique behind it. And that's kind of what makes something iconic. Because if you think about from the perspective of Eddie Van Halen's Frankenstrat, there are so many stories and legends about that guitar and why he did what he did with the guitar. And in the end, Eddie always came back to, well, it just sounded cool. It just did its job. It did what it was supposed to do. And that's why he did it. But the Les Paul for Slash, that's a little bit different here because, well, not everybody knows the story of what actually happened. Like even people who have dove deep into his Les Paul and who made it, there's really no certainty of who made it. Like like Gibson has examined it. I know that there's been other really big people in the guitar world who have examined this thing, and they've kind of traced back the roots to who like wound the pickups and, you know, where the person who made the guitar, you know, what they were doing at the time. And, you know, I even think I remember hearing that Slash might even got this out of a pawn shop. I could be mistaken one of his other guitars. I'm sure somebody's going to correct me, but just the sheer mystique around this, and then pairing it with a Marshall amplifier, and then that iconic opening riff on Sweet Child of Mine just ignited the guitar world once again. You know, late 80s, new band coming out, lit the world on fire with Appetite for Destruction. The sound alone from the guitar and Slash playing was enough to, you know, capture people's attention all these many years later. So for me, that is going to be my number 3. So we've got, to recap, we've got Ringo's iconic drum set, Paul McCartney's Hoffner Bass, and Slash's Appetite for Destruction Les Paul.
Fair warning, I did not dedicate my picks for each instrument. As much as I love drums, I feel like if I was to pick a drum set, I would just be going to Neil Peart and saying, because he was one of the first drummers to just literally go insane with how many drums he had on stage. But that's not fair to the instrument of the drums itself. So I have 2 guitars and a bass. Let's do the bass first because Matt kind of already touched upon this a little bit. But when you think of a Rickenbacker, you automatically think of Lemmy and the different type of noise and power he was able to get out of that Rickenbacker is unmatched by anyone. Especially later in his life when he used the Rickenbacker that was actually essentially half art, half instrument, and it was like interesting carvings into his bass, which for someone like Lemmy and Motorhead, you wouldn't think would have such an intricate kind of instrument on stage. But just when you look at that instrument, you just automatically just can imagine Lemmy with the microphone set up so he looks like he's talking up into the air, and him just banging the hell out of that bass. And I think a huge testament to how incredible the tone they were able to get out of that bass was when going back to the Grammys and their questionable decisions on how to pay tribute to artists, when the supergroup the Hollywood Vampires paid tribute to Lemmy, and they did a cover of Ace of Spades. And I love Duff McKagan. He's one of my favorite bassists of all time. But when he did the bass intro to Ace of Spades, you're like, oh man, that sounds nothing like Lemmy. Like, oh man. Like, it just made you realize that even an incredible artist like Duff couldn't even come close to the sound and the power that Lemmy had with that instrument. So I had to go with Lemmy's Rickenbacker.
Which is actually kind of interesting. Also, you mentioned the sound that Lemmy was able to get out of there. Lemmy also, I don't know if many people know this, but Lemmy also played a Marshall bass head. And I don't know too many other people who played Marshall bass heads, which he called Murder One, and then we're going to do a 6 Degrees of Separation, which was also the tribute track name that Metallica did on Hardwired to Self-Destruct for Lemmy.
There you go.
So the more you know.
The more you know. The second one, this one might cause a little controversy because you mentioned about the iconic Les Paul Gibson guitars. And there's no denying some guitars have bigger influences on others. But growing up, there was something so badass about seeing Zakk Wylde's Bullseye guitar. With the classic Les Paul body, but with the simple black and white Bullseye look on it. We can even do a whole just episode about Ozzy Osbourne guitars. I kind of feel like, I mean, of course, Randy Rhoads and even his Jackson guitar is an iconic instrument in metal. You can almost make the argument that you can tell when someone was born by which James Bond they were into, just like how You can tell when someone was born by which Ozzy guitarist they preferred. And growing up, it was Zakk Wylde who was the guitarist at the time. Pierce Brosnan was my Bond in a way, just like Zakk Wylde was my guitarist at the time. And it's one of those guitars that's like, as soon as you see it, even if you can't see the face, but you see the guitar, it's like, oh, Zakk Wylde, boom. You just know it's his guitar. And of course, he's an incredible guitar player too. And I think it's also a huge testament that even though he's no longer with Gibson, he launched his own guitar and audio company, Wylde Audio, that produces his own little unique takes on the Les Paul, as well as a few other different signatures and flying Vs and whatnot. And there's some interesting guitars, and he actually partners with Schecter to produce and distribute them. Even with his new guitar company, I mean, he made a little tweak to the Bullseye itself, but you can tell, boom, that's the Bullseye. That's the iconic Zakk Wylde signature look. And I think that's extremely telling when it's hard to almost separate the guitar from the person in regards to style. So that's my second pick, Zakk Wylde's Bullseye. And kind of in the same vein, I dare you to look me in the eyes and tell me that you can picture B.B. King playing any other guitar that's not named Lucille. You can make an argument that Lucille is one of the most famous blues guitars, and maybe just guitars in general. I mean, you see that guitar and you automatically think of B.B. King, or you see B.B. King and you automatically think of Lucille. Literally, that was the love of his life, Lucille. Anyone who even tries to play that guitar, kind of like with the Bullseye, it's like, no. You bought that and you think it's cool, but that's B.B. King's guitar. That's not yours. That's not your signature. And the way that he also took the blues music and really just kept it going through for so many decades. And a big part of that was also Lucille. So to recap my three, Lemmy's Rickenbacker bass, Zakk Wylde's Bullseye guitar, and B.B. King's betrothed Lucille.
Indeed.
Were you about to say, Matt, that you could actually picture it? Because you'd be lying. You'd be lying if you could picture B.B. King playing any other guitar. You'd be lying. No, you're lying. You're lying. So.
That's the guitar you want him to play.
No, you can make the argument that that's just as powerful. Just like how it is kind of weird to see Zakk Wylde. I mean, he definitely plays other kind of guitar. Like we said, his Wylde Audio, he has different designs and even different shapes. And even before he went off, he started to incorporate some more flying Vs in his playing when he, especially when he got gifted guitars from Randy Rhoads' estate. I don't think he had the original, which is another classic instrument, the polka dot flying V. I think that was just a remodel.
I think it was, yeah.
And then also, of course, he would be playing some Dean guitars that were gifted because of his connection to Dime. But even when you see that, you still think it's weird to not see him playing a Bullseye guitar. Just like how B.B. King, it's bizarre to like. I want to do a deep Google search. Maybe there's a photo of him playing a random ass Fender. I can't imagine him playing anything but playing Lucille. Not even another Gibson, Lucille.
Well, see, here's my argument. I'm already going to kind of attack Zakk Wylde on this one. Okay. I think you've hit the nail on the head when you said it's the Bullseye. And that's all it is the Bullseye. Because he's got so many guitars. He's got a Coffin style, an SG style. He's got an Explorer style. Obviously, he's got the Les Paul style. But they're all Bullseye. That's Zakk Wylde is the Bullseye. Zakk Wylde's not the guitar. So that's why I'm going to say it's the design. It's not the guitar. Now, when you think like Slash is partnered directly with Gibson. Gibson is putting out a line of Slash Les Pauls.
Oh, no, hold on. That's if you're going to use that argument, you can make the same argument because Zakk Wylde did that as well. They put out a line of Zakk Wylde guitars.
Right.
Maybe it was more design focused. And I would also argue that I can picture Zakk Wylde with a million other guitars on stage too. I'm sorry. Picture Slash with different designs.
Yes,
on stage too.
Does. But what do you always come back to? It's always the Les Paul. But I think the design is a huge key part to this as well.
I
don't think so.
I think it does.
No, because there has been maybe sometime in the 90s, where BC Rich did a signature Slash
Well, because that was his first guitar before he switched over to Gibson.
Well, that's part of the Appetite for Destruction Les Paul's mystique is how it came about and how he found it and then played it on Appetite, and then that was his guitar, and that was it for a while. So I think for me, obviously for me because it's my pick, but Slash still being associated to the original Les Paul guitars. Zakk, I get he's doing his own thing, but in him doing his own thing, he's taking his own design cues, he's taking his own spins on classic guitar shapes, and he's using all of them when he plays live. I've seen him do it. So I think still Slash, with being as big of an advocate for Gibson all these years with that Les Paul and all the different styles of Les Pauls that he's had over the years, and the pinnacle of them being that Appetite Les Paul, I think that it's got to make the list.
I would disagree, but I'm going to make a interesting compromise that maybe people who heard us going on and on about guitars are going to be surprised to hear. I would actually argue that the final three list should be Lemmy's Rickenbacker, Paul McCartney's Hoffner, and Ringo Starr's drum kit.
Interesting.
So we eliminate all the guitars because I think you can make the argument that what each of those musicians brought to that instrument was so different, interesting, and unique and revolutionary that to a degree that we even take it for granted. I think Ringo Starr, for as many people who like to make a joke about Ringo being the least important Beatle, does not get enough credit for his musicianship and for his just overall approach to the drums. And a big part of that is his drum kit. I think you can rewind and listen to my whole defense about Lemmy's bass. And I think, and I was actually even just like you, torn between going with McCartney's Hoffner and Lemmy's Rickenbacker. I mean, I think you got to remember that McCartney made bass a little bit more popular for a lot of younger people who may not have given that a chance. And I think McCartney, he gets all the credit, rightfully so, for being a songwriter, but he doesn't get enough credit for being a musician. And I am going to stick to I think the design is an important thing too, because when you look at that bass, you don't think of other people playing it regularly. You think of Paul McCartney. In fact, that bass is nicknamed the Beatles bass. So I would say we choose Ringo's drum set, Paul's Hoffner Beatles bass, and Lemmy's Rickenbacker.
It's an interesting take on this. So I feel like if we do this, we're going to light the internet on fire.
Let's light it on fire. Let's set the world on fire. Let's do it.
Try to set the night on fire.
Fire! I was also kind of trying to go to the Slash solo song, Set the World on Fire. But it's cool. You can do the Doors too.
Well, for people who are listening to this, I think the Doors are going to be a little bit more a hit than Slash's World on Fire that people may not have heard of.
It's a great album. I don't know about you, but it was a tough three to pick. I was so close to picking Brian May's Red Special because, again, when you look at that guitar and you also know the sounds that come out, like when you hear a solo from Brian May, you know it's Brian May, and a huge part of that is that Red Special guitar. I also don't think Prince's Cloud guitar gets enough credit for being such a out-of-this-world design, and yet he still was able to just shred in that thing. And if you think also back to the Super Bowl halftime show with him just wailing on that Cloud guitar, during Purple Rain while it was raining, it's just an iconic image.
Hashtag best Super Bowl halftime show ever.
Coming, yeah.
Fight me.
Yeah,
seriously, there's nothing else. That's it.
To the point that when we do a Super Bowl episode of Pick 3, we're gonna have to make the exception that that's not the one that either of us pick because it's that great.
No, wait. I mean, I picked Coldplay and Bruno Mars.
I actually enjoyed that year. Anyway, we're getting sidetracked. So I wanted to mention those two because those really, I feel like don't get enough praise.
There's so many guitars that don't get enough praise.
That's
I
true.
mean, right off the top of my head, there's just one other one that it just kind of blows me away that it looks so effortless when he plays it. Matt Bellamy of Muse and his Court. It's like a, how do I put this? I think it's like a Telecaster style.
It's a interesting take on a Telecaster. I think that's the best way to say it.
Yeah, it's like a weird Telecaster. When he plays it, nobody else plays this guitar. And he plays it, and it looks just so effortless. And I think he's even got one that's got like this touchpad in it because Muse has got all these really weird sounds. And it's just really cool. I wanted one for a while, and I just could never pull the trigger on it. And they're not even that expensive.
Yeah.
Like, I think they're like $500-$600, maybe like $700. But they're really cool if you're looking for something a little bit different and you've never heard of a Court. It's the MBC1. That's the official name of it. It's a really cool guitar, and I think you get some really cool sounds out of it. And it just looks, like I said, it looks cool because it's just matte black, but it's definitely the Matt Bellamy guitar. But I know, nowadays nobody really pays attention to the instruments like they did, in the past. But
before I make you commit to my proposal of a pick 3, going to drums real quick, and you talk about Ringo Starr with a simple set, but still what he was able to get out of it. I mean, of course, the Jason Bonham set, the Keith Moon set, the Neil Peart sets, I mean, they're just so iconic for being so massive and huge. But then I always actually appreciated what Tré Cool was able to do on a punk drum set, because I think it's really underrated when a drummer can just make sure to keep the beat on time while still adding in a little flair here and there. And I think Tré Cool doesn't get enough credit for that, of Green Day, of course. And I think if you listen back to some of the Green Day albums, especially, the more of the 90s, everything American Idiot and then previous, he really does incorporate some cool just fills while still keeping the time. And of course, a big part of that is the drum set, which at one point during Green Day's touring, I think maybe a few tours before American Idiot came out, he would actually burn the drum set and then come back and perform it. I don't know why I vaguely remember hearing that. But we're digressing. Matt.
Zakk.
Are you willing to commit to my proposal that the most iconic signature instruments are Ringo Starr's drum set, Paul McCartney's Hoffner / Beatles bass, and Lemmy's iconic Rickenbacker bass?
Yeah, let's piss people off. Yes.
Boom! Let us know that if you disagree. Although maybe you'll agree. Maybe you'll get over the fact that we decided not to pick a guitar and realize, yeah, we picked some good picks. Let us know what you think on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, at Epic Footnote. Also subscribe to our YouTube channel to get more videos and podcasts like this.
And also don't forget to head on over to our official sponsors website, etsy.co/shop/Lucky13 Beard Co, the number 13, and get your beard oils and balms from the Lucky 13 Beard Company at 10% off using the code EFP10. Do it. You'll be glad that you did.
Thanks so much for listening, and Matt and I will see you at Guitar Center. Hope you join us for another episode soon.
Yeah. Peace.